really appreciated. Included in the material you received was minutes, and I read them. I don't know if other people had a chance to. It's 2 pages, but I thought they were accurate. And does anyone have any corrections or omissions or anything like that? Could I get a motion to approve
the minutes?
Jake, okay. Second by Bob. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Now,
John, I will abstain for not having been present for those.
you didn't find any errors, though?
I didn't. It was perfect.
Okay, good. All right. So abstain. So we're still trying to get ourselves, everyone who wants to be a member up and sworn in. And we have 2 requests. I may not be looking at my the most recent agenda, but I think there are requests to appoint Joseph Inglesby and I believe Kim Vitello to the select board to be appointed as members of Climate Resilience. Both, as you all know, have been extremely active in this committee, so they're not newcomers, but we'd like to get them on as fully fledged. So if someone would move that, Joseph and Kim. Mike Yagman raised his hand. Were you going for a cup of coffee or were you raising your hand?
He's on mute.
Okay, he's raising his hand.
You're on mute, David.
Yeah.
I'll second
Mike.
that, John.
Okay, Mike Sullivan. All right.
I'm supporting their nomination.
All right, Mike Yagman, Mike Sullivan. Any discussion on that? All those in favor say aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all for that. Now, it means, Kim, as always, everyone's invited to the meetings, but you need to be then appointed by the select board, and then when that's done, Michael Burris will contact you or Dia, and then you go to the clerk and get sworn in, and then you can vote, okay? But thank you for all the participation you've done so far and will do in the future.
And appointments will be forwarded to the select board for their December 15th meeting.
Okay, great. Now, the meat of this meeting is we're in report writing mode finally. And I am very grateful that Jeff Canton and Dia and Nefelli and others at UMD are taking all the various committee works and trying to transform them into a single committee report. So the layout's the same, redundancies get eliminated, that's the whole hope. And Jeff has a presentation that he wants to make on one of the segments of this report. And I want to emphasize just one of the segments. And I'd like him to go through it. It identifies a lot of the impacts that have come up through the committee process. And then with help from UMD, it is tried to score them, and they started with numerical scores. And I suggested that instead of numerical scores, where someone might argue between 100 and 95, that we just put 3 buckets: high priority, medium, and low. So that's what you'll see in this presentation. And when he gets to that, I think there's a lot of them. There's 50 or 69 or whatever there is. There's a lot. The way the town moderator has done that with budget items at town meeting, I think is pretty efficient, where you go down the list, and if someone wants to hold something to discuss it, then you just say hold on that, and then we'll try and get through all of the list with a number of holds. And depending on how much time we have, we might be able to then approve all the ones that weren't held and get into discussing some of the ones that people want to discuss. Does that make sense as a way of doing it? Okay.
Can I ask a question though, John?
Yeah, Mike.
Jeff and Dia were kind enough to spend some time with me last week, and just as one member of the water subcommittee, we went through and I just did my best to guess about using this protocol of priority and the different measurements, if you will. But I wanted to have a meeting with the water subcommittee and allow us to sort of do a consensus on those items, so that what you see here for water is just...
It's incomplete, I understand,
Yeah,
because
okay.
you haven't met.
Got
And
it.
I can't, I mean, if we get through the whole list, including the holes today, it'll be a miracle. And
Yeah,
I'm
okay.
not sure I believe in them. So I think there'll be time for your committee to meet, and we'll just consider anything we don't get, you haven't gotten to yet on water as kind of a hold, for further discussion. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, Jeff, the floor is yours.
All right, thanks, John. Well, the last time we met, I went over and reviewed a bit the scoring system that UMass Dartmouth had set up for us. As John said, they took all of the climate-related impacts that we had identified through our committees and set up a system where we could kind of evaluate them for relevance and priority for Westport. They recommended and utilized the scoring system that the state had used in their climate assessment, which relied on 3 different factors. So Michael, if you want to just jump through, we've got one slide that shows our what we're calling asset categories of things in Westport that we want to protect and make more resilient to climate change, and the number of impacts that we've identified that could potentially affect each of those. So there's approximately 50 impacts. Some of those impacts cut across these asset categories, and that's fine. But on the next slide, you're going to see the scoring system, which uses 3 evaluation criteria. The first is the magnitude of the impact. And again, this is the system that the state used in their statewide evaluation. How large of an impact do we expect from this particular climate stressor or impact? The second factor relates to disproportionality. And initially, they're focusing on, will people living in defined environmental justice areas that are defined by the state, will they be more affected than the rest of the population? But then they've also broadened it to take into account whether there are other vulnerable populations at disproportionate risk, regardless of whether they live in an EJ area or not. And those could be based on their lower income, their age, their mobility, their health status. Any of those factors could impact people's ability to prepare for and respond to some of the things that we're looking at here. And the third factor is the need for effective adaptation. So how much of a gap is there between what we're doing now and what we need to do to adapt to this impact? Or how urgent is it? How soon is action needed? If we don't take action in the next 3 years, have we lost the opportunity to do something? Are we putting ourselves past the tipping point where we won't be able to do anything effective after that? So those are the 3 factors. And as I presented in the last meeting, what UMass did is they scored each of these on a, let's call it a 1 to 100 scale, and then they averaged them. So each impact on it, a score that was the average of these 3 factors. And when I ran some of the numbers, I was seeing that there was a large clumping of impacts that were kind of within a narrow range, right? From 0 to 100. So I suggested we do something that I've used in the past in my work, is to use a multiplicative, we go to the next slide, system where we multiply each score to come out with a total score, and that gives us a broader spread of the scores between 1 and 1,000. You could show that, Michael, if you want. I think it's the previous one. So, magnitude is scored 1 to 10, disproportionality is scored 1 to 10, adaptation gap is scored 1 to 10. We take those scores, multiply them, and we get a range of 1 to 1,000, which gives us a bigger spread than we see when we just take the average. So I think that worked out fairly effectively. So the next step was to go with each of the subcommittee heads, these 5 sectors, and walk them through the system and have them try and score each of the impacts across these 3 factors and get us a total score. So when we did that on the next slide, you can see that 19 of the impacts, of the 50 impacts we identified scored high, 14 scored medium, 11 scored low, and we have 6, including some in water and 1 in fire that I've just added because of the report from the fire chief that has yet to be scored. So it's a pretty good distribution of high, medium, and low here. We can always play with the cutoffs if we want, but that's what I'm presenting tonight is the results of this exercise, again, that we did with each of the subcommittee heads.
That these scores are a combination of impact, adaptation, and disproportionality. You sum them all together?
Correct. Yep. So the final score, the total score, we had a cutoff for what we classify as high, medium, and then low.
And could I ask you how you do that? I mean, if you're going from a score from 1 to 1,000, how do you get to 3, 4, or 10, or whatever?
So we looked at that spread, Jim, and we just said, let's make a cutoff here where, approximately 1/3 are high, 1/3 are in the middle, and 1/3 are low. And like I said, there's no science to it. It's just whatever you want to do to,
Okay.
to find some part of.
But I think from what you just said, I'm not sure it's clear. So there's 10 different topics under agriculture.
Correct.
3 of them were high.
Correct. Yep.
So the 3 isn't like the result of the multiplication.
Yep. And we're going to show them by
When
each of these asset categories.
we actually ended up with numbers in all these categories.
Okay.
And then that gave us the range, and then they divided the third, just high, low.
Okay.
And, we kind of discussed, I think for presentation purposes and communication purposes, it's adequate for us to say, these are the ones we identified as high, medium, and low. Red, green, yellow is how we can score. That always seems to work when you're trying to communicate these things.
If I could add, all of the report is important, but I think it's the last section that gets to recommendations for action by the town, by individuals, by organizations, etc. Is really where the real impact of this report is. What are the recommendations to mitigate, reduce these impacts? And we're not talking about that tonight. We're talking about what the impacts are, so one step at a time. And my sense is that when we go to, or the select board, or whoever is the acting party, to try and implement a recommendation, more than likely it's going to take funding or grants, or if you look at say 3 examples that the beach committee said we should re-nurse the beach. The heat in public health said something about air conditioners for affected seniors. We talked about the utility company doing something with utility lines. So the funding sources for all of those might be very different. And we're probably not going to go down the list and say the first thing we're going to try to do is the highest priority and go down that way. It's going to be a combination of that, And if there's a funding opportunity and it's on our list, then we're gonna wanna pursue that funding opportunity.
Yep.
And that's gonna, you know, our planning department is aces in terms of grant applications, or going, for example, for the Eversource, saying, we want you to bury some electric lines. And we've had meetings on that, getting someone else to do something. My sense from a strategic standpoint is if you go take the utility line and to Eversource and say, we want you to do this, but it's low priority on our list, it's not gonna be highly likely that they're gonna get excited about it. If you say, this is really important to us, then maybe they pay more attention. So from getting resources, I hope all of the things that are going to be in the recommendations are things that will make Westport more resilient and would be good, and it'll be a matter of what do we try and do first, and where can we get resources to do it. And so I think we want to think about whether something is high category, medium, or low. What does that do to our chances of getting the resources necessary to implement it? Now, the extreme would be, well, everything's high priority. I don't think that makes a credible report. But I think we should keep in mind that Michael and others will be using this report to try and get resources for the town to accomplish things like this. Sorry.
No, it's fine, John. So the next slides present each of these asset categories and the scoring outcome for them. And I know, John, your hope is that we get committee acceptance of these results so that we can move forward and write the chapters around these priorities. I think that if there are questions on any of these, that I would want to kick them back to the subcommittee folks for their consideration. So how do you want to proceed with, do you want?
Well, let's go down. Thank you. You want to recognize that Joseph is here. Joseph, earlier on, we said we would recommend you to the select board for a full membership. And so when you get notified, you got to get sworn in. But Joseph is here. He's been working with Ray on agriculture.
Yep.
And so if you want to, I don't know whether this will work, but why don't we try it? Go down these. There's 50 of them. And you know, a sentence that explains it, and then if people have, you know, I think this priority is wrong, I'd like to discuss it, we'll just put a hold on it, and we'll discuss it probably at the next meeting. Does that make sense? Can we try that?
We can. I'd just like to let the subcommittee chairs take the lead in explaining what these impacts are and why they've been rated the way they are, if there are questions about it. The first area, as you said, is, you know, we kind of bundled agriculture, fishing, and aquaculture together, and Joseph was our lead on that. So we've got 3 impacts that scored as high, 3 as medium, and 4 as low. I'll just open it up for any questions about this sector, I guess.
Jeff, I'm still confused. So the 3 that are high, does that mean they were high on both impact, disproportionality, and adaptation?
No, it means the combination of those scores, you know, when they're multiplied together, put the aggregate score in the high category.
I got you, okay.
Yeah.
But you're scoring each aspect separately and then combining them.
Separately and with equal weight, I would also add.
Yeah.
So based on the committee, so Jeff had a sentence to describe each of these, and the freshwater ecosystem degradation is rising temperature and changing precipitation patterns will lead to a reduction in water quality and changes in water quantity, resulting in changes to habitat quality in rivers, streams, ponds, lakes, and freshwater wetlands. So that's listed as high priority. Now, does anyone want to put a hold on that so we can discuss whether it should be moved down to medium or low? If not, you want to hold that. Okay. check the holes. All right, want to keep going?
Sure.
You got it?
Oh, you want me? Okay. Second one is reduction in clean water supply. So this addresses changes in water quantity and quality for water supplied for human uses. Changes in precipitation patterns and saltwater intrusion can lead to impaired surface and groundwater supply available for municipal, industrial, commercial, and agricultural uses. And I will note that these are UMass's description of the impacts. I think what we're getting at here is water available for agriculture uses, feeding animals and irrigating crops. That's the bottom line here. And that can be potentially impacted by climatic changes.
If I could make a comment.
Yeah.
I think on the first, the freshwater ecosystem degradation, I think you have to also consider the impacts on the shell fisheries and the general ecosystem. Because
Sure.
the shellfish such as the bay scallops are very dependent on eelgrass. The eelgrass is having issues with degradation because of the falling of the water. So you have an algae growth that's forming and killing that. So if you're, I think that the freshwater...
Is this not a distinct category for freshwater impacts, however, Joseph?
Yeah, it impacts,
But
yeah.
not-
Fresh and brackish.
Okay.
My understanding is that eelgrass is a marine, is an estuary
It is,
issue,
it
not a
is,
freshwater issue.
Yes, it is. I'll push it a little further then. If you look at the headwaters, for example, of the east branch of the Westport River, it goes up to what? To Nukachuk Lake. And I believe that there you have real issues, which is one of the largest spawning areas, according to Brad Chase, that could be a magnificent spawning area for the state of Massachusetts. It's enormous, but it's being followed by not only the septic systems washing into the Nukachuk Lake, but also fertilizer coming in from the
So
ponds.
I want to stop this now because we're into the debate. The idea is to set a rating. And what we said we do is go down, and if there's no disagreement, we'll go to the next one. If there is disagreement, we'll put a hold on it. Constance has put a hold on this, so this is going to be discussed in more depth so we can all come to agreement on what the rating should be. Is that all right, Joseph? Yeah.
Well, you know,
Do you want to put a hold on them all?
here's,
Yeah.
I think it's a I think we've got a fundamental, I have a fundamental problem with this in terms of the way this is all structured, and I have brought this up repeatedly, in that the way this is put here out, it's as if we agree that all these things are going to happen because of climate change. And I don't know how much, I mean, I certainly, if there's marine ecosystem degradation, maybe that has to do with chemicals flushing into the river. Maybe it has to do with so many other things, not what we are perceiving as climate change. Coastal wetland degradation, that would come, I think, more from development than climate change. I think fundamentally, I really have a hard time with this, the way this is all laid out, because we're just basically saying all of this is going to happen because of climate change, and we just don't know.
So if it's happening, then this is about resilience much more than it is about climate change. This is about how to get Westport resilient to these changes.
Well, the name of our committee is
You want to change the name? You want to make a
No.
motion to change the
the
name?
climate change.
Guys, for lack of a
Climate
second, what would you
resilience.
like to do then?
I'm saying that I think we need to have the conversation, the more philosophical conversation about what we're doing here and what our purpose is again probably before we go through each one of these and say yay or nay. And, you know, there may be a point where the committee just feels very strongly about all of this, and I will just have to back away and say, you know, I need to resign because I just can't go along with all this. And that's perfectly legitimate.
Mhm.
But I just, I feel like I'm being railroaded into this whole scheme.
No, we've been working at this for 3 years.
I know.
And constant, so we've had lots of discussions. And we're just trying to make progress to get to a point where we're making recommendations on how Westport can become more resilient.
Yeah,
Yeah,
So-
Phil?
So this is how I see what we are doing, which is that the Commonwealth gathered a lot of experts and did an analysis and took it out for public comment and wrote these reports. And these reports are the cornerstone of what we're doing, because nobody around the table, no matter how much we sat down and thought about it, is going to come up with the answers. So we took the state's reports, and the state had broke it out into regions. And then we looked at our regional reports, and that formed the second building block. And then our job, as I saw it, was to look at the regional analysis and apply it to Westport, and to see whether or not we kind of agreed or disagreed, whether or not something that was a high priority at a regional level or watershed level really applied to Westport. And that's where we are right now. And I think it makes a lot of sense. And part of it was what John was saying, is because that's where the funding is going to be. That is, we want to do anything without, we've all heard this, you know, we can't come back and say, well, we didn't like your report, so we came up with a new idea, and here's the justification for it. And I mean, there's no way we're going to get to an answer with your path constants, because no one's going to figure it out. No one's going to break out no one around this table is going to go through the climate models and decide that, you know, and then apply that to Westport. So that's where that's where I have been for the last 3 years.
Mike, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to suggest, you know, the first two items on this list are a result, I believe, of what must be the state's projection that we will have reduced precipitation.
Yeah.
That's a hard prediction that they're making, and it can be
Right.
quantified, and
rise in water temperature probably.
Yeah, there's going to be extreme rainfall, there's going to be extreme drought. And
but we
it's-
have but we can look at a graph that says this is
Yeah,
where it's
yeah,
going to,
yeah.
or this is
And,
where it's going to
you
go,
know,
right?
And
And I haven't seen that,
people who are
but
climate experts have projected this. And may I just say, and I know you may disagree on the model that's being applied to get to that result, but, and I don't have a problem, just to say, in saying in this report that there are uncertainties
Yeah.
built into this, and that we can say that people disagree about the models, and, you know, and that, and just put out what the rationale was. But
so that's why, I'm sorry.
no.
So that's, when we did the water report, the first draft of the water report, we started out with a section that really belongs in the whole report, which is a definition of several tenets of climate change and global warming that we think are going to happen, whether that be sea level rise at a certain point, temperature temperature rise at a certain rate. In this case, I think we just need a declarative statement that says the committee accepts the state's assumption that we were going to have 10, 20, 30% reduced precipitation over the next 20, 30, 50 years, so that when it does or doesn't happen, we can say, we can change our thinking about
no,
it.
because I think, oh, well, anyway. No, it's not for the, it's not for,
No, it's not.
it's not for the money.
It's because farmers get
It's not for
affected
getting-
by this
It's not for
concept.
getting grants.
It's because farmers get affected. And so what do you want to do in Westport, right to farm community, if you know things are going to affect farming? Do you want to just say, well, there's so much uncertainty that we're not going to do anything? Or do you want to say, it's likely that we may get the same rainfall, it may just be more droughts and more downpours. But that still affects farming. Rising temperatures affect farming. I just listened, driving here today, about a study that says the temperature in New England's gone up 4 degrees since 1900, which is compared to 2.3 degrees for the rest of the country because the Gulf Stream's moved. It's not climate change, it's the Gulf Stream.
And rising CO2 is supposed to be great for plants, so hey. I mean, there's just, okay. I don't really, it's fine. I'm not going to continue down this. I don't agree with this, and I haven't for a long time, and
Yeah.
I'd like to tell you again and again.
No, I get your message that you don't
always-
believe in climate change. I
I'm
understand
not
that.
saying I don't believe in climate change, but what I don't believe in is going along with the state's ridiculously high numbers on things and saying, okay, let's just be clear about it. We're going to go along to get along, because if we don't
No, that's
sign
not
up,
true.
if we don't sign up, we're not going to get any grants. So, I mean, so I get that.
No, you don't get it, because what we're trying, I have no interest in debating whether it's RCP 8.5 or another number, because that's not what this report is about. This report is about changes are occurring, we can see them, and what do we do to help
Okay, but
senior
do we have-
citizens? What do we
have
do to
blame
help
it all on
farmers?
climate change?
I'm not blaming it on
Okay.
climate change. I'm saying these are the impacts. What are you going to do about the impacts? Agriculture depends on, understanding and forecasting the future so farmers can make investments.
You can play the farming card here, and because it's just like, I'm all for the farms, but it's like okay.
Can I,
So can I ask
Yeah,
a question, Constance? So if you don't like the rubric that the state uses to come to the conclusions that they do, and you want to use a different way of figuring out, is there climate change, when's it going to happen? How does it change this? It may be just a difference in magnitude, but it's still, I would think, with all these things, you're listing all the things that are going to be impacted by the big climate change or the small climate change, but they're all going to be affected.
Or maybe it's impacted by the way that we treat our earth more than climate change. Maybe it's the things that we actually do, like clear cutting forests and putting up solar panels, where we cut down trees. And I mean, maybe it has a lot to do with overdevelopment. Maybe
But
it has
how
a lot
does
to do
that,
with-
how does
I mean,
that affect what
it affects the basic premise of this whole thing.
but how does that affect the list here of what is a high priority, what is a low priority, what's a medium priority? I don't get it. I don't get how it would affect.
Shauna,
Okay.
So the way that I'm looking at it, Constance, is that I'm going to choose vector transmitted disease, which is on the next page. Okay. Vector transmitted disease is identified as a potential impact of something that might happen because of climate change. It also might happen for a myriad of other reasons, right? But I think the exercise that we're doing here today is to say, okay, vector transmitted disease, regardless of whether climate caused it or something else caused it, what is the magnitude of the impact on our community? Who are we disproportionately exposing certain groups to it? And do we need to make an impact? So I think, while I agree that the overall report is talking about climate, I think the exercise that we're doing right now is these are potential impacts that could be where climate could be a contributing but not the only factor, So how does this factor on Westport? So that's the way that I'm thinking about it, is not, is climate change really high impact on affecting this? It's, if this happens, is it a high impact on Westport? And is there disproportionate?
So
The three
even if it's
things.
just the nitrogen that's going into the river.
There, I don't see nitrogen in the river on this
No, but I mean,
list.
but you have riverway or whatever, waterway degradation, well, I mean.
So waterway degradation, there's 100 things
So-
that'll affect
Right,
waterway
and so-
degradation.
and
So
we are-
is that important to
We are
Westport or not?
decoupling this exercise from climate change.
I am. I'm looking at
Well,
it as,
maybe it would be better to call this a community resilience program instead of a climate resilience program, because we're talking, the emphasis really is about how do you make Westport more resilient. And if we said it's about community resilience, then we don't get stuck in this debate about what's causing it. If something's happening, if you have, you know, more vulnerability to ticks because they don't get killed in the winter, then there's a responsibility to understand that
Or
that's
because we're
happening.
taking away all
So-
the habitat for the deer.
but
and
there
all.
could be
You know, I
multiple
mean, everything.
reasons.
But I think that's a good idea, actually, John. I do think that the word climate in it, well, and of course, we're using the state's climate stuff, so that is a real problem, but I get why we have to do that. But as far as our committee goes, if we could decouple this from saying all this is going to be happening, we believe as a committee because of climate change, because we don't know. I think, and I feel a lot better with it.
Not
I don't
going
know
to
if
say
anybody
that.
else would.
We're not saying.
The only thing we need to agree on, and I think we're there, we can get there, is that weather of all types is becoming more extreme and more volatile, and these are presenting threats to health, to agriculture, to fishing, to fresh water, to salt water, to the beaches, and
Well,
that's
the
what we're looking
observable
at.
data doesn't add up to that. That's the problem. I mean, you know, if we,
There are scientific links between increases in the volatility and the severity of the weather and these kind of
the
these kind
weather
of
is
threats.
not all that much. More.
Okay,
I mean, it's
so
always
if-
been, I mean, the Great Depression, I mean, during the Dust Bowl, my mother grew up in Kansas, okay? She was a child during the Dust Bowl. I mean, you know, I'm just saying, are the things that we're doing bad for the earth in many ways? Oh, yes. But, I mean, okay, I understand. And I'm sorry to belabor the point, but I think that the whole clemson thing is,
Clemson, I have a problem. I think you're backing up and trying to, you know, sort out the causes. I think the goal of this committee is to figure out what is the adverse impact on people in Westport and what can we do about it. We don't have to address what caused it. That's not our goal here. So, for example, the increase in Lyme disease and tick bites, we don't have to, you know, sort out what caused that, but we need to help the community address what they're going to do to prevent getting tick bites and getting Lyme disease.
okay?
And I don't think that, you know, you're raising a kind of theoretical question of whether we want to attribute it to rising temperatures or climate change. I think the focus of this report is what are we going to do and what kind of resources are we going to get to help people in Westport become more resilient and deal with these adverse events, like tick bites.
Yeah,
For
Michael.
example, we don't have to do the research to figure out why there are more ticks in the winter.
Because winter isn't as long, because it's getting hotter, because the environment is conducive to ticks. Like, why are we getting West Nile virus cases in Bristol County?
Why do robins stay here?
Why are ticks from Texas migrating here?
Right.
I mean, you know, if you would come and, that is, if people hadn't said, you know what, well, I don't know what the exact number is, but in the last 10 years have been, you know, the hottest years, you know, and.
No, I don't know.
Well, I'm just, there are some things which I agree are not particularly connected, but to say that that deaths from extreme heat, which I think is which are enormous are very large in urban communities, is not related to climate, you know,
There are many more deaths from
It has to
extreme
be.
cold.
no, but I mean, if you just look at the statistics over time, okay, if you just look at the data, the same thing is to,
Well,
I mean, I understand, you know, I mean, I'm willing to go so far, but there's some categories to say we're the Climate Resilience Committee, but it really has nothing to do with climate. And we're going to rate it as a priority because we think that it's going to get increasingly worse over time. And maybe it won't be in 5 years, maybe it won't be in 10, maybe it won't be as bad, but to just throw all that out just seems, you know, I feel like an ostrich.
Yeah. Joseph?
Even within my lifetime, I've seen changes that have occurred within plants, for example, where species that have been common in my childhood, like sugar maples and American beech, are dying. The sugar maple is a northern species. It's retreating, it's dying. You find the same with disease vectors that are happening with the beech, for example, with beech leaf dieback and the ash. So you can see all of these incremental changes that are happening over our lifetimes. And the same happens also within the fisheries, for example. You know, we're having a retreat of more species being replaced by some of these species now. And I was talking to Brad Chase not too long ago. He's the senior marine or anatomist, diatomist fishing expert for the state. And he was saying that within the past years, he's seen incremental rises in the waters affecting the anadromous fish, for example, and the temperature changes within the water that fish cannot tolerate. You know, and also changes in salinity, which affect both shellfish and the fish, anadromous and fish, for example. And so, you know, these changes are unfortunately happening. It's incremental.
Manatees and flamingos in New England.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Manatees and flamingos in New England.
Let me, oh, Jake, go ahead.
If marlin were caught in buzzards.
I think I'm taking a little bit of a different approach to the committee as a whole, and I think with constant statement about really what the cause is, I'm looking at this almost from a one major event standpoint. And I don't care what causes that event, whether it's a hurricane or nor'easter or no name storm or name storm. We sat around the table soon after I became a select board member with many departments around the table, and unfortunately Westport didn't necessarily have a plan in place to deal with a response to a major storm or a major hurricane. So I'm looking at this as we owe it to the public, you know, from a standpoint of let's provide them the best options in how Westport can address those options. Because as you know, after the fact, when something bad really happens, they're gonna say, well, they're gonna point the fingers at everybody in town, whether it's the Board of Health, whether it's select board, whether it's emergency management, of why nobody addressed that. So I'm looking at this more from, I'm not gonna argue what the cause of it is, but I think it's more of a situation of how does the town respond? How does the town become more resilient to these events, no matter what the cause of them is? Because somebody's going to get the blame when something doesn't go well. I mean, my argument is I think in this town, development is the biggest threat to the community, whether we're dealing with groundwater, whether we're dealing with wastewater and septic. So I think that's a bigger issue than this, but that's outside of the scope of here. So I'm looking at this at a higher level as how does Westport address storms and protect its constituents and citizens when something like that happens, no matter what the cause of it is. We can argue about the cause, you know, and I just think it's...
Taking your point, Jake, just in looking at the climate issue, you know, if you look at the 38 hurricane and the damage that occurred, just as a storm event. And killed hundreds of people, blew down millions of trees, and the ocean, factually, by tide gauge measurements, the oceans now are, it's less than a century, about 10.5 inches higher than they were before. So if you have a warmer, higher ocean, a warmer, in the oceans, factually from measurements, are getting warmer. So if you look at, if the 38 hurricane would occur again, which has 100% probability of happening because it's in the mix of the 100-year flood event that we project. So it has 100% probability of happening, and it already has happened, and we know what the consequences are. And now we're faced with an ocean that is warmer, that is, its evaporation contributes more rainfall into the storm, and its sea level is at least 10 inches higher than it was when I was a child sitting in my grandmother's home on Wood Street in New Bedford, riding out the 38 hurricane. It's clear that the consequences will be more severe if we have an event that's already occurred. There's a lot of things like that. And that's what the focus of this should be. Are there things that we can measure that would get worse if we have storm events or flooding events, and what do we do about that? And things like I think the impact of water quality in the Westport River from septic systems, the more homes we build, the more septic systems we have, I think that's a greater threat to the water quality than the fact that the ocean, that the river will get warmer. There is that climate effect, which is a multiplier on the fact that we're putting too much nitrogen, our septic systems put too much nitrogen in. But it's, you know, these factors are not, it isn't, septic systems aren't all related to climate change. It's just us human beings acting in building, because we have a nice place to live and people want to come and live here.
And I'm not saying that things are not, you know, the weather's not getting warmer, or there's not, or the sea level isn't rising, but I think that it's happening much more slowly than what the state is trying to, and so.
Yeah,
I think there are other things that are just as important or more important that we look at to mitigate that or to do something about it than you know, what is.
So let me
anyway.
step in. I think this is
all over.
I don't think we will ever reconcile a debate between, is this going to happen in 25 years or 125 years? And I don't think it's necessary to reconcile that in order to come up with recommendations for individuals, for the town, for institutions that help make Westport more resilient. If you take Jake's example that Bob talked about of a single storm event, we don't have to argue, is it going to happen in the next 10 years or 20 years? What we have to ask ourselves is, what do we do so that people who are in vulnerable locations have a better chance of surviving it whenever it happens? Because a 38 hurricane has already happened, so it can happen again. Or with Lyme disease and ticks, it is happening. Is there something we can do about it to reduce the number of people who are debilitated by Lyme disease? And so that's another question.
Yeah,
but,
the answer to that.
But that is the important question, is getting from impact to what are the recommendations. I'd love to spend lots of time on what the recommendations are, what makes most sense. But I think before we do that, we've got to say, what do we think the problem or the impact, whatever you want to call it, is that we're trying to address. And I think maybe a way to get through this is, because we're already at 6 o'clock, we're not going to go through this list the way I thought, is for people to take this list, and we'll schedule a meeting in January. And when we come back, then we just have to define what the impacts are with the help of the committees. So what Jeff has done is talk to most of the committee chairs, or all the committee chairs, including the fire chief, because he gave a really good presentation about another impact. And he's got shorthand here about what the impact is. And I really don't see this as the most important step of this. I think it's, what do you do about it? Whether it's, a single storm event, or Lyme disease, or any of the other 50 things that the committees have come up with. And I think to get us through that, and there's nothing in here that talks about climate change. It talks about what the impacts are, not what the causes are. And I'm happy to debate anyone about whether climate change is happening, but I don't think that's just going to take our time. And it's not going to get us to the finish line. So I think if we focus on resilience, and I think if people looked at this list,
Westport climate impact scoring results.
yeah, so if you look at the impact constants, no matter what's causing it, and you say either this impact is happening or it's not happening, and I just said, if you want to change the title, I'm okay with that. I'm trying to get to what does the town do to protect its citizens?
I understand.
And just taking time and doing nothing doesn't protect anyone.
And you've said that repeatedly, and I agree with you repeatedly. And so, fine, but I'm just saying that the very name of our report is that it is Westport.
Yeah, if you want to make a motion to change the name, go ahead.
I mean, we could just go with Westport Resiliency Plan.
That would be nice.
That's just the title for the presentation.
Maybe
It's not the
I
title of
should
the
resign
report.
from the committee.
Yeah.
And if this was the development committee, we'd be looking at the development impacts scoring. We're focused on climate, and it's not the only thing that's affecting some of these receptors, some of these things that we're
Mr.
seeing.
Chairman, maybe there's some way we can advance this by, I think people from every committee is here, maybe just to share what people were thinking when they scored this, because some of us sat in a room and we figured out, like, oh, what is that? Is it a 5 or a 10, or is it a 7? We did that just to pick an example of in each one of these things. What was something that made you think this was high, and what is something that made it low, so people have a little context of what this, and I don't mean read every line, but what is
John, if I could build on what Bob's saying.
Yeah.
I want to thank Jeff again for going through this effort to try to herd all these cats and to put all of our perspectives into some semblance of a uniform approach. But from an engineering perspective, we're just missing one thing here, and that is the problem, definition, a definition that is quantifiable. And I'm going to say that by my count, there are 5 tenets of global warming / climate change. Sea level rise, and not in order of importance, so I'm just going to list these out. Sea level rise, rise in ocean temperatures, ocean acidification, possible changes to the Gulf Stream, and localized, as we experience it, climate change in the form of precipitation changes, temperature changes, and storm events, whether they be more frequent or more strong. Those are the 5 or 6 things that we're trying to deal with.
When you say we, in the water committee or the whole committee?
The whole committee, Every, I mean,
Well,
it may not.
You haven't mentioned anything on health.
Right, localized climate change in the form of temperature and humidity, okay? So, but those are the things that affect in some way affect all of our subcommittees. And all we need is a declarative statement, whether it be a repeat and a belief in whatever the state has said, or some modification of it that says, like, for example, for water, we're looking at sea level rise as a big deal. We should agree that, okay, we're either going to use this curve or that curve, one or the other, but that's what the basis of the report is. So, and we can argue about it, but once it's decided, that's the basis of the problem, and therefore we should decide on it's going to be 2 feet in 30 years, therefore we need to think in a certain way, or it's going to be 8 feet in 30 years, and we should think in a different way. That's what we're acting on.
So I push back a little bit, Mike, because I think the problem definition is 50 problems here. They're all different. Oh, no, they're not all. There's some redundancy.
Those are impacts from problems.
Yes, and those are the problems. The impacts are the problems that we have to then take the impact and say, what do we do about that particular impact?
I'm okay with everything he's done. I'm just saying that the beginning of the report should say, this is the problem. These are the things we expect to happen over the next 20, 50, 100 years, and this is how we're going to deal with it. We see these things happening as a result of rising temperatures, less precipitation, increased storm activity.
So what Jeff and Dia have done is to comb through the different committee reports and come up with 50 impacts that each potentially could have a different set of recommendations to deal with that impact. And maybe we shouldn't even prioritize them because it's just going to take a year to get through these kind of debates. But another way to do it, I don't want to spend too much time on it because the real work here is what do we do to make Westport more resilient in the face of that impact? What do you do if you want to lower the amount of Lyme disease, for example, or deaths due to extreme heat? What are the actual programs you do? And to protect people of Westport. So I think where we could go is we've got in the 2 handouts that got sent out a summary of what came out of the subcommittees. And Bob, I think what we need to do is the whole committee needs to weigh in, even though it's the infrastructure subcommittee, on is this high priority or not, whereas you certainly should be the one explaining what is this impact, and every chair of the committee. But I think if people looked at the 2 sheets, this one that just has high, medium, and low, and this one that has, 1 or 2 sentences on what that impact actually means, and then mark it up and say, here are the ones where I don't agree with the ranking, high, medium, or low. And, if you've got 10 that you don't agree with, you mark them down, and Sean has got 8, we mark them down, and then we'll go through the list and say, which of these ones do we want to debate, whether it's high, medium, or low? And once we get through that exercise, however long it takes, and we've got, if not consensus, we've got majority votes on what the rankings are for these 50, then Dia and Jeff can work with the committee chairs in saying, not each one of the 50 is a chapter, but each one of the 50 is probably a paragraph or 2 in the chapters on agriculture, on health, et cetera, and they can start writing about and amplifying, because there's a lot of raw material in the subcommittee reports that could go into building out those, 2 paragraphs on whichever the impact is of the 50 impacts, and if it's 50 times 2, it's 100 paragraphs there to describe that. But then once we get there, then I think it doesn't have to mention climate change. It's mentioning what the impacts are.
It should mention global warming, climate change. That's the,
Yeah,
whole-
but
that's, I don't have a problem with
I
it.
don't think we want to get into an argument of sea level's going to rise this much in 25 years, because I think that's not going to be answerable.
Can we go to Kim Batella? She's there.
Say again?
Can we go to Kim Batella? She's
Yeah,
there.
oh, sorry, I didn't see you, Kim, go ahead.
That's it.
You're on mute,
You're
Kim.
muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Great, so I actually had questions about how some of these categories were broken down. So for instance, you have the decrease in the fisheries as marked as high, but coastal wetland degradation is medium. Meanwhile, it's, the decrease in fisheries, although I understand temperature is part of it and the fish migration is separate, the wetland coastal degradation is what causes a lot of the fisheries issues, because they're the nurseries for the fish. So they're super important, and so like the decline is a result of the coastal wetland degradation. And I would say the same thing for like soil erosion. Soil erosion is part of the thing that causes freshwater ecosystem and saltwater ecosystem degradation through sedimentation. So I'm just like trying to understand why some like causes and some impacts were pulled out separately.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Kim. I think that's a really good point. I mean, in a sense, a lot of these things, if not all of them, are interrelated in some way. And that if something is high importance in one area and it's listed in another area as low importance, how do you reconcile that? It either should be high or low in both.
And that's why
Yeah.
some of the recommended actions could link back to these other things. If
Yeah.
we want to improve fish productivity or arrest its decline, then we need to look at wetlands and soil erosion and those types of things, and maybe some of the actions that are recommended address those.
So,
Or tie
Yeah,
them.
Phil.
Well, first, I hope we never get to the point where we are not talking about climate. Because I think it's a big jump to say we disagree with the conclusions of the models going out into the future to say, let's not
Right.
talk about climate and let's take it off the name of the committee. It's kind of like saying, people are dying, but we don't really want to point at the cause of it. No, we just want to, do something. So that's one thing. The other point though, that I agree with, and partly what I thought that adaptation is supposed to get to, is how soon do we think this is going to happen, and do we have to do something right now to deal with it in a big way, So if the proposal was, we really need to build a 25-foot high barrier off East Beach, and it's got to be done in the next 5 years, we would say, no, that's not, we're not there yet. We're not at that point, But, so I think the issue of, when things are going to happen are going to have to be struggled through in the adaptation part of it.
Yeah.
Within the committee, I guess within each subcommittee, and then with the committee as a whole. And and just to fess up to say, please ignore the numbers in the health report. I never understood the numbers from the beginning, and my scoring reflects, it kind of reflects that. Not that I don't think that some of those, so I agree with the high, medium, and low. I can't really figure out the numbers very well, okay? The reasons that, in my report, the reason that, the increase in need for municipal policy review and adaptation coordination, or whatever the one that talked about needing more money and staff. I think everyone should have the same score for that. No one's going to do anything, it's gonna require everybody to do, and
Yeah.
everyone's gonna need staff and time and all that stuff. So, and, so I like, and I would go, like my committee, this is all me, it's not my committee, and I'd be happy to go back to my committee and try to work out, a new framework. And it is really clear that, some of the things that particularly, let's say, were the infrastructure report, we're talking about, what'd you call it, life and limb, and so we have to just figure out how to make those.
So Phil, do you think we could, I think that's really helpful. Could we at our next meeting, whenever it is, say that we want to start with, on health, you would describe the 10, whatever there are.
Right.
And say, this is why I think these should be high, and these two should be medium, and these should be low. And your committee has been doing all the work on these things so that these are what the impacts are and why we prioritized them or rated them high, medium, and low in this way. And then once you do that, people can say, well, I'm not sure about that, Phil. I
Sure.
think,
Yeah.
but it would be each, Mike, when it got to the water ones, you'd be doing the same thing. Bob with infrastructure, Joseph with agriculture, going through, here are the impacts and here's why. Remember, for this section, the objective is just to get a high, medium, or low. That's what we're trying to do. Later on, we'll build a sentence, which is on here, into a paragraph with the help of the committees and Jeff, so it'll read right and people know what we're talking about.
Right.
Jeff, I have a specific question about how to read this. So looking at the water one, and I haven't had a chance to go through the rest of them, but I was very confused because, so up here it says damage to tourist attractions and recreation amenities, and it's high, but if you look down, it says the same thing as low in that listing, and then the same thing for economic, everything is, so some things are in medium, but they're also in TBD. But I guess I'm most confused about coastal, about that one, which is in both high and low. What does that mean?
Maybe just duplicate.
Yeah, one's high and one's low. That's a good question.
No, they're the
There's
same item.
duplicative in
Yeah.
this.
It's just a
Same
duplicate,
item.
just a duplicate, I
It's a
think.
duplicate. It should be one or the other, or a medium.
Or something else got supplanted.
There is,
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
I have
Yeah.
a question, and I think that, well, a comment more than a question, but I think that the various chapters should be in concert with each other.
Yeah.
For instance, in the water, it says groundwater supply and wastewater disposal systems are low priority. I can't believe that. And number two, they are completely absent from the health department, which to me is a real omission because sea level rise is going to make people's wells go sailing, and that's going to be a real problem. So
I have an answer. I have a good answer to that.
yeah.
Okay. So it's not the right answer, but I do have a really good. I have the answers to why to that. So when I started my reporting, my drafting, I went back to the to the health section of the state reports, and I used their ranking. And part of the reason that that worked is that they actually had data about things. Like here's projections on vectors, and here's projections on an increased heat. So anyway, I use those, and in my report, I said, and while describing these bad things that could happen from sea level rise, I left it to Mike and Bob to deal with that, because I thought they would have the data, okay? They would know, for example, with septic systems, how many homes are going to be flooded by, by flood, how does the FEMA map change over the next 50 years? And you could actually, so those are the houses that are going to get flooded out and their septic systems. I wasn't going to go look up that data. I was going to rely on the other committees to tell me the answer. I mean, the challenge with what Mike is doing is that he has the one that's not really an impact thing.
Right.
He has like a source. He's like the, you know what I mean?
Chapter 1.
Yeah, he's exactly.
But if I could build on what Phil just said.
So
if you look at
So
the three,
that's how it
the
broke
three
out.
things that impact that score, magnitude of the impact could be high, but disproportionality, well, the way I've read it, this is not a population of economically disadvantaged people, so that ends up on the low. So that's an order of magnitude right there taken away. And then the need for effective adaptation is a little bit contradictory, because are we doing enough to adapt? I'm assuming we would put a low score if we're doing a lot to adapt, and a high score if we're not doing, okay, so and that part I didn't read, and how soon is action required? So there's one factor in there really makes a big difference.
Well, don't you think, though, that if we're going to use this to determine what we're going to do in the future, if we're going to go to the state and say, we really want to do something with water and wastewater, but they say, well...
I think we'll figure all that out when we'll figure all that out, because this is just a first pass.
We're still at the blind man describing the element stage, because I rated groundwater supply as a high risk, and I think it is a high risk.
But that's why, two things here. That's why we need to, I think, have the subcommittee chair say, this is what is in my bucket, and why we've got the priorities. And then other people say, well, I disagree, that this shouldn't be a low priority, it should be a high priority. That's one point I would make. And I think we can do that with the committee chair presenting it, and then the whole committee looking at it and saying, I've got a disagreement with this one. The other ones I'm fine with. But the other point you raised, Jim, is a number of these things, you mentioned the staff, I think, or Phil did, affect one or more of the subcommittees. Now, you don't want to describe the well problem exactly the same 5 different times, just because it's public health and it's water. You only want to describe it once. And where you describe it isn't, to my way of thinking, all that important, as long as it's in the report. And to take the well, you'd say, yeah, this is a water issue, but it has health implications, and it certainly has infrastructure implications, and it probably has other implications as well. But you'd only want it described once in the report, not 4 times, even though it might fit in 4 categories.
So here, maybe this is an example of that and why it's a challenge, okay? Because when you talk about damage to roads from floods or storms, okay, you would think that the infrastructure committee would say, well, that's an important thing because roadway infrastructure is it. When you look at the health side of it, it's the operative thing is, well, interruption to people getting to hospitals. You can't get the emergency, you can't get the ambulance down there, okay? And again, I would end to go back and say, well, what's the data? Do we know with all the hurricanes that have happened in the past how roadway interruptions have affected mortality? How many people have died? Because that in the health world, that would rise it up.
Look
There's
at
no
Hurricane
data
Katrina.
about that. No one knows the answer to that,
Let's do some studies.
you know? And so I would expect Bob to rate that high, okay, it's a high priority, which is to address, the viability of our roads, or East Beach, or that the evacuation routes are secure, so people aren't stranded and flooded. But it would be hard for me to say, well, that's more important than extreme heat, because there's data about extreme heat.
Yeah.
You know how many deaths are caused, or other kinds of air quality kinds of things. So I think it's part of the discussions, if we get into that level to talk about it.
Yeah, I'd like to get into it.
That there may be disconnects.
I
That
don't
we
think
would
it's
really like
disconnects,
our
but-
roads strong, even though we don't know how many people die from it. It just kind of makes common sense.
Well,
Like you want to
That's an
evacuate
important
people.
thing, because I think when you look at the 12 or 15 people around the table, the common sense about is a real asset to this committee. We have a feel when you look at all 15 people about, yeah, this is a real problem, or no, it isn't a real problem.
I mean, I'm assuming that, I don't know what's going to happen next, but I assume that, I don't know, I would think at least the way I'm thinking, just because I'm in a department that is the topic of my report. I mean, there's no infrastructure, board of infrastructure, but I would be going back and saying, okay, well, what can we do about our top priorities?
Isn't some of this dependent on what we can do?
Yeah.
Because I haven't heard that really talked about. I mean, some
Yeah.
of these things are,
Yeah.
I mean, when it says shifting distribution of native and invasive species, really seriously, what can we, as Westport, really do
That's a
about
really
that?
good point.
And so, but that's rated medium, and I'm like, how can we, it's like that.
If there are things that are big problems, but we don't think we can do anything about it, we will come to that, Constance, when we get into the going through each of these impacts and what do we recommend.
Well, it depends who we is too, right?
Yeah.
Like the town probably can't do anything, but individuals or businesses, if you're a landscaper in town and you don't know about this is happening and you read it, you're gonna say, well, I'm not gonna recommend this plant because it's gonna be 100 miles north of us in 5 years and I don't want somebody coming back and saying, this plant died on me. Or if you're an individual and you're a farmer and you're looking at this and you're not aware that there's this shift in invasive species coming, you can start planning for that. I agree. I agree with that, but the point is, it's about awareness, and that this is something that is on the radar of people who are looking at
So
these things.
here's what it's 6:20, and I'd like to end this by 6:30 and be protective of your time, and we need to set a next meeting. I think the way to have the next meeting is to have.
It's not clear though where this is actually speaking, or we can create hopes.
I think that's a mistake.
What's that?
Michael, I think you need to mute.
Okay, sorry, where was I? I think the best way to do this, based on the conversation that's happened, is to use the materials that Jeff has sent us, and to have each subcommittee chair, Joseph or Bob or Phil or Mike, say, here's what my impacts are as listed, and I'll elaborate a little bit on them. And I'll explain why we think the ratings here are correct, or maybe you think they're not correct, they should be changed. And that'll give the water committee time to do the other ones. You've done most of them. And then, after the subcommittee chair goes through that, people can say, well, I'd like to take this one and elevate it from medium to high, or I'd like to take this one and downgrade it from high to low. And people can discuss that, and if it needs to come to a vote, if we can't reach consensus, then we'll vote on it. But I think I could see that we could get through that in 1 or 2 meetings and get this task done. Does that make sense as a way to do it?
Sure.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I just, maybe this is asking Jeff to give us some guidance on that. Because of the three categories of, in the, so to speak, the scoring, the weighting, the one that is, I can get magnitude, like I have a sense of magnitude and I have a sense of adaptation. What I don't really know is how to factor in disproportionality.
Yeah.
And it would be, and I think that it would be helpful if everyone had the same understanding of how that was being used. What I mean is, so, I don't think that EJ is a big issue for us, but it could be around age and, you know,
Income.
Disability and those kinds of things.
And income.
Yeah, I mean, so, again, just an example, so everyone says, okay, you know, if you, extreme heat, well, here's the vulnerable populations, you know, elderly, the elderly and the very young, the very old and the very young.
And people without air conditioning.
And people who work outside, okay?
Yeah.
I mean, there's, and so I don't know, so I've looked at the demographic tables, okay? It's like, well, what percentage of the population is X age and what percent of the population is Y age? You know, to get an idea of how, but, you know, that's just me making that up as an idea. And I don't know, I don't mean that we should discount disproportionality, but it would be helpful to me if we had some guidance as to how we should weight that, if we're going to weight that in the final ranking. And it would be good if the central forces said, here's how you should handle that category. It'd be helpful to me. I don't know how, you know. Do you know? Okay.
I agree. We should all use the same narrative anyway. That just helps us, you know.
Yeah.
And it's been provided. I just got guidance through the meeting that we had, we probably should be using the same guidance.
Are you know, use the same? I know there's.
I mean, I think, Phil, there's clearly some impacts that hit either portions of the population or parts of the town more disproportionately.
Right.
Okay. Sea level rise is going to hit the southern part of town more.
Right.
Okay. Are residents there less able to respond, or because of historical factors, age, income, education, mobility? Those are the things we want to consider.
Yeah.
Because you need
Just-
demographic information. I think Michael can help you with that.
We
Well, I
put
just
out
don't know quite how to.
page, like a heat map with the 3 demographic, socioeconomic data for
Yeah.
the 3 census tracts in Westport compared to Bristol County, compared to Massasoit.
Okay.
So you can kind of see where we're above or below the surrounding area in those
Kim, would you like to comment?
It
characteristics.
was the idea of 1 to 10 for like disproportionate that I would say, well, what's, you know, how do I measure, you know, disproportionality, I guess was.
So don't get, we're
won't
talking
get-
about high, medium, and low.
Right, I know, but.
Don't get into, you know,
Yeah,
this
yeah, yeah.
has a number of 286 or 387.
No, I'm gonna try to stay away from
So-
the number, but, okay,
Yeah.
I'll try and figure it
So
out.
we're
But I'm
just
just
trying to
saying if
get-
they're,
High, medium, or low.
yeah,
Sure.
Yeah.
yeah,
I have
yeah.
to leave
Yeah.
because I have to pick up my
So
wife-
can-
my wife at the airport, so
Yeah.
I am heading out.
What do you
because I'm
think
running
about
trouble.
Thursday, January 22nd?
John, before you move on,
Yeah.
to tell how your hand raised for a while.
Wait a second. Jay, do you know if you can do Thursday, the 22nd?
I'll be in Las Vegas for work.
Okay.
That's also when the high school, they're meeting of the
Yes.
high school.
The high
Oh, they are?
January 2nd.
All right, so that's not a good date. How about offshore wind is the 29th, right, Constance?
Mhm.
If we go into the first Thursday in February, I can't do it the 5th. how about the 12th of February?
Good for me.
12th of February
5 o'clock.
at 5 here. Now, Kim, sorry,
That's okay. I just wanted to point out, like, when you're thinking about disproportionality, like, when you think about impacts to the beach, even though people in the low-income area of Westport don't live on the beach, that's the one place they have to go to get cool, like, when you're looking at extreme heat. So, like, I would just remind people to think about how those impacts are affecting them, even though they're not right in that general area.
good point. All right, so what we're gonna do on the 12th of February, isn't that Abraham Lincoln's birthday? Anyway, is that we will have each subcommittee chair go through the impacts on their list, which are roughly 10, and summarize the impacts, what they are, and then say this is why they're rated the way they are. And then we can have a discussion of the committee of the whole saying we agree with these or we don't agree with them, but we should get to a point where the committee as a whole is supporting the ranking system that you put forth, Mike, even if it has
Changes or whatever, yeah.
Does that make sense as a way to go on the next meeting? Okay. And again, I think the really important work is when we go from impacts to what do we do about it? And Constance makes a point, what if there is nothing we can do about it, Because there may be ones like that. All right. Thank you all very much.
Motion to adjourn.
Jim.
I just wanted to Jake's point, I'm sorry he left, that his whole point for being here is what do we do in a disaster?
Yeah.
We have a hazard mitigation plan that we've just gone through. The town has formed a committee and they have submitted it to the state. We should have it back in a month or so.
We haven't submitted it to the state
We
yet.
haven't submitted
It needs to go to the select board for endorsement, so it'll go to the select board for endorsement at their next meeting on the 15th. And then, should they endorse it, it will go to the state,
Yeah,
for
and
approval.
as well
Then
as
it comes
FEMA.
back.
And same with the emergency response plans related to that as well.
Right, so after that happens, then it's going to be responsibility of the town
12th of
government
February.
to implement.
Oh,
Yeah.
our next meeting.
Yeah.
The select board meeting is the 15th.
All right, so thank you, Jeff.
Huh?
12.
This one is, it always does
Select
with me
board.
exactly not the way I planned.
15th?
We still
15th,
got
okay.
some work done. I think we're good for the next meeting.
So you just meant this week then?
Yeah.
All right, we're adjourned.
10th.
Thank you all.
He was there and he said that, at the